Would you like to learn how to make a better bagel?
Well, today on WTF, we're going to show you how to do just that by using non-diastatic malt powder to make an amazing bagel bomb. Hello and welcome to WTF, where we transform food here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen. I'm Chef Scott Aaron.
And I'm Janie Wang, one of the owners of Modernist Pantry. And here on WTF, every week we cover unique ingredients, techniques, show you new recipes to get you started in your own kitchen. And this week, we're going to be talking about a new product we're excited to introduce, and it's called Non-Diastatic Malt Powder. And if you've been watching WTF for a little while, you know that we talk about diacetic powder a lot because we use it in a lot of different baking recipes in our baking episodes. But there's been kind of, chatter and people want to know about non-diastatic, which does not roll off the tongue. And so we decided to do an episode about, what the difference is between the two, how do you use it, and what's the benefit, the pros and cons of using each one. So Scott, maybe we'll start today with maybe a little bit of a overview of diacetic versus non-diacetic and what the difference is between them so people understand what they're getting.
Yeah, so diastatic malt powder is an additive that you would put into any bread or baking application, and it's made from malted barley, and diastatic means it is enzymatically active, so it has amylase in it, and amylase then eats some of the starches, produces sugar. The sugar feeds the yeast, you get a better rise, but also that extra sugar makes a more uniform crust on the outside. So that's what a diastatic malt powder does. Mm-hmm. Now, non-diastatic malt powder is already been activated. There's no more amylase in it, so it's not going to then eat the starches within the the dough to create more sugar. But it already has that extra sugar content, and sometimes it's already slightly darker too, so you can get a really beautiful uniform crust on the outside. It's going to feed that yeast, and it's going to take less time than a diastatic malt powder.
Okay. And for people at home who may have already purchased diacetic and they're wondering, do I now need non-diacetic? Can I just go without? If we had to, just kind of put it in two sentences, why you would use one over the other, or maybe both in certain instances, what would you say to that?
So there are different uses for non-diastatic malt powder instead of just having, just use diastatic malt powder. That's not really a thing because there are different uses for non-diastatic malt powder. So with this bagel recipe, instead of adding, let's say, honey to the boiling water for our bagels, we actually added the non-diastatic malt powder, which has that sugar, it has that color already, and it makes a nice uniform crust on the outside without having to have another ingredient added to it. So that's an added benefit, whereas the diastatic malt powder wouldn't necessarily do that because it needs the starch to create the sugar.
Yeah, and if you're kind of wondering which one might be right for my particular recipe, as part of introducing this new product, one of the things we're doing on the website right now, if you go there at modernistpantry.com, we are introducing a value pack that contains one of these 50-gram packages of the diacetic and one 50-gram non-diacetic, so you can try both for yourself and kind of find out which one you prefer, right? And that's kind of an easy way to just do a little bit of experimentation in your kitchen. So that's modernistpantry.com, links in the description below. So I know that we prepped a couple of bagels with both of them to kind of try to do a little R&D here in our kitchen. Can you talk a little bit about what we have here?
Sure. So we were able to do bagels with non-diastatic and diastatic. We did slightly different, whereas we added the non-diastatic to the boiling liquid for the non-diastatic. We kept our original bagel recipe for this, but you can see the difference is really minimal. The only thing that's important is the amount of time.
Okay.
So the amount of time it took to create a non-diastatic malt powder bagel was around 4 to 5 hours maximum, whereas the diastatic malt powder needed that time overnight. It's about 18 hours to fully eat some of the starches, create a better lift in the dough, create that crust on the outside. If you tried to do it in 4 hours, it would be really splotchy on the outside. You get those dark brown spots where the amylase is really active, and then you get lighter spots where it isn't. So with the non-diastatic, you get a quicker, amount of time to make something. Let's say you don't have 18 hours to make bagels. You want them in 4 hours because sometimes we want to eat things relatively quick after we make them. So non-diastatic works really great for that, whereas diastatic does work really well. for longer preps or longer fermentations. One other thing is that the diastatic malt powder breaks down those starches, right? We've talked about that a lot. But when you break down the starches and you create the sugar to feed the yeast, you're left with mainly protein. It's not 100% protein in there, but you are left with less starch, more protein, so it can tend to be a little chewier.
Okay.
Whereas a non-diastatic, it's still going to be chewy because that's the nature of a bagel, but it's not going to be as chewy as, let's say, a diastatic malt powder bagel.
Yeah, and if you're looking at these two powders, the light one is the diastatic, and the darker one is the non-diastatic.
Yeah, so yeah, the light one is the diastatic, and the darker one is the non-diastatic, and that darker color does kind of shine through in the dough itself. So we used about 10% less of the non-diastatic for our dough.
Very cool.
Yep. So we actually have a little recipe here that we're going to do. We made some bagel bombs because bagel bombs are delicious. We didn't want to just do the bagels again, so we made bagel bombs. And so we have our bagel dough here, and it's very important when we do this, and you can see it on our Instagram as well. It's going to be on our YouTube in a few days. On how to make a bagel bomb. So what a bagel bomb is, Jane, if you want to lift one up,
I do.
It's a filled bagel. So you don't have to cut it in half, toast it, and slather on all the cream cheese. It's all going to be on the inside.
Yay.
So the one we're going to do today is a pizza one. And we've made 3 different types here. So what I'm doing is I'm going to press out the outside. This is important, right? Because I want this, like the top to be even with the bottom. And if I'm folding up this bottom, it can tend to be really thick on the bottom and then the top be really thin if this was perfectly flat, and then that'll burst open. So I do just pinch around the edges, so I make it nice and flat, and then you just give the middle just a little pat here. So it's very simple to fill it with whatever you want. We have some in here that are jam and cream cheese. We have some in here that are duck confit, cream cheese, apricots, onion confit, like a little bit more involved. You can do whatever you want. We have some nice salami here that we're using for our pepperoni. We have some mozzarella, like a little mozzarella ball. And then here is kind of our pizza mix. So it's basil, cheese, a little bit of tomato paste. So I'm going to place that right on top, and I'm just going to scoop it right on top there. So very simple, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the sides, and this is important because I don't want it to touch anything that's fatty. If I touch anything that's fatty and it gets in between this seam, it's going to burst on me. So I lift up this corner, and almost like a big dumpling, I'm just going to keep lifting it up, and then I'm going to pinch these. If you overfill it, these are going to, push out any of that cream cheese, and it's not going to seal properly, and when it doesn't seal properly, it will burst on you. Through R&D, I found that out. Right. Now, very simple here, and you flip it over. There's a few different things you can do from here. I like to put them in a little bit of boiling water with some baking soda and the non-diastatic malt powder, and you only have to get it in there for about 10 seconds per side. You don't want to overdo it because sometimes if you overdo it, it helps kind of burst the bottom. So very, very short amount of time per side. But then after that, we actually have another new ingredient that we're going to talk about in a few weeks that's really cool, but we wanted to add it to this because we found a way to stick things to the outside of bagels pretty much indefinitely. So if we have this, like you see a little bit comes off, but even if I tap on it, it's really well stuck on there. And this ingredient is called Ultra Stick, so it's a great way to get things to stick to the outside of the bagel without having to worry about, every time you take a bite, it's just exploding off of there, right? So it's a very simple ingredient. We'll talk more and we'll show more about it.
In a few weeks?
Yeah, in a few weeks. Let me put this in a better spot so we can see it.
Okay.
So it's very simple. It's just water and the Ultra Stick. And I'm going to brush it on the outside. Imagine this was boiled in the non-diastatic malt powder, water. Now, if you're filling things, you're not going to know what's on the inside unless you give kind of a visual aid for the outside. So our sweet bagel with our jam and our cream cheese has some sugar, just some turbinado sugar on the outside. Our duck confit has kind of an everything mix. And this one here has some oregano, red chili flake, and fennel. So we know it's our pizza bagel. So if I get it on there, and just make sure everything's in contact with that Ultra Stick. Yes, some things will fall off, but we'd like to just brush them right before we put them out. So once it bakes, it'll kind of adhere all those things to the outside, and you'll have a nice, beautiful golden crust because of the non-diastatic malt powder.
Yeah, and I will say, like, when Scott first brought one up, I think it was the duck one, and I just ate the whole thing. And it's really nice because it's kind of a really good alternative if you're trying to make something for lunch and you're tired of eating a sandwich. It's like a sandwich, but definitely 100% better. So as always, you're going to find all of the recipes and all this information in the links in the description below. If you have any comments about, non-diastatic versus diastatic, or you want to try them, let us know, leave your comments, and we'll reply back to them as always. So from here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen, I'm Janie Wang.
And I'm Scott Guerin. Thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe. And hit that bell so you get notified when we drop a new video.
To get today's recipes and all of our recipes, remember to go to blog.modernistpantry.com, where you'll get recipes, ask a chefs, tips and tricks, and more.
And if you haven't already, tell a friend so they know what's going on here at WTF.
And as always, to get any of the ingredients you saw today, you can go to modernistpantry.com to shop.
And until next time, we'll be here in the test kitchen helping you create memorable and magical experiences.